This is Sauron, one of Magic's most complex commanders, and the original Dark Lord. When I last looked at his convoluted ability suite, I made an exhaustive, comprehensive analysis of the commander's abilities. But that level of detail left me lost in the sauce. So today I'm back with the secret tech that can tie every one of these abilities together into a single, elegant, powerful divorce settlement. Yeah, this Dark Lord gets multiple Christmases. Let's set the stage.
With Ring Temptation, Sauron effectively has 8 abilities, each incentivizing different behaviors. Menace is the easiest way to capitalize on and unify these abilities, because it means our Ring Bearer will be virtually unblockable because of how unprofitable it is for opponents to block it. Not to mention how much easier it is to connect with an army if it has Menace. Instant speed, bounce spells, and wild magic effects give us max value on Sauron's spell cast trigger by giving opponents more things to cast that we know they want to cast, and also by removing commanders, pointing us in the direction of a control deck. One of the ways this control deck builds card advantage is with its graveyard. We're throwing cards in there with 2 of Sauron's abilities outright, not to mention that many of the ways we remove enemy creatures also load cards into the graveyard because those bounce spells are usually instants and sorceries. So keep an eye out for payoffs for and in our graveyard. But a control deck also needs some threat that it's protecting that will take over the game in some way, and that's where our divorced dads come in. See, ordinarily, the army that Sauron amasses is a great candidate for this role, but because of his mana cost, it's a little harder to rely on that. And I noticed that with the graveyard content resulting from our natural play patterns, we actually have a few other options for creatures whose powers scale to our graveyard count, and whose damage output can push a win along the same damage and life loss axis that these abilities align with. And to force a more decisive win than mere combat damage, we can cloak the world in fire and shadow by turning our massive creatures into bursts of non-combat damage to enemy faces by flinging them, as our divorced dads would fling their rings at ex-spouses, making these ring-flinging divorcees. First, we'll be cutting these cards. These cards are very flavorful, but they're not really at all aligned with our strategy. The Wraith angle these cards aim for can pair well with each other, but not necessarily with the game plan we have for this deck. So we'll swap them out for our divorced dads. Next, I'm cutting these cards. These effects all give us extra ring tempts, but the ring temptation we want needs to be attached to effects we would be interested in outside of ring temptation, especially since the utility of ring tempts past 4 drops off so steeply. Flavor notwithstanding, Sauron is too expensive to be worth its other effects. Call of the Ring is too slow, and in my opinion too steep a price for card draw, while we left behind our Wraiths matter packages in the last 3 swaps, so these Wraiths have even less relevance than they did before. We'll swap them out for these cards instead to preserve the flavor of the deck while also committing to an effective game plan. Lastly, I'm cutting these cards. These cards all care about armies, but not really in the ways that we care about armies. If we could make multiple armies, we would have multiple ring temptations with Sauron online. But Amass only piles counters into one army, the same army that we would ordinarily have by default. Amass cards need to be doing something else that we want, so we'll swap them out for these cards instead that can amass while also filling other roles. One more bonus swap for your budget, brought to you by TCG Player. You're already buying cards, so use my link in the description to support the channel when you do. No matter how good this card may or may not be, I'm not convinced that it's worth the price tag, so try out this much cheaper option and support the channel while you do. So what do our lands look like? Our land base is pretty heavily biased towards land with the island typing to try to count towards engulf the shore. Faceless Haven and Mutavault can serve as extra armies when we're ready to unleash multiple ring temptations per turn, while Takenuma and Lazotep Quarry can each make use of our graveyard content and recover a critical piece of our plan. Shizo and Sunken Palace can accelerate us in different ways, either by giving an army or ring bearer evasion, or by copying a powerful piece of our game plan. And lastly, Kazul's Fury can serve as a fling or a land drop on its backside. So what's our timeline? On turn 2, what we most want is ramp, especially that which can serve as a blocker for our longer game strategy, but we're not super picky about it. Next, I want ways to load up the graveyard while also gaining other advantage that we care about. Turn 4 is a great time to fire off one of our instant speed bounce spells on an opponent's end step in order to load their hands for our next turn when we cast Sauron the Dark Lord. Then, if needed, we can refill our hand with these cards to keep on the pressure with more removal effects. With Sauron in play and our removal controlling the board, either directly or through politicking, we'll connect with our army and generate even more graveyard flow until we either find a bigger body than our army, or we grow the army large enough to slay the table with either a Chandra's Ignition or a twice-copied fling effect to subjugate the remaining enemy life totals.
Now that you've had a chance to see how the deck plays, let's chat about power.
This commander is a tough one to get your head around in any way that's mechanically faithful and not just thematically faithful. The mana cost is the big thing holding back Sauron from being a very fast deck, and the specificity of bounce effects makes it harder to control the boards of Bracket 3 with effective removal, as well as the slow pace of the army growth and ring temptation. But the incremental damage-based game plan this deck offers feels right at home in Bracket 2, alongside its sneaky graveyard deck as an effective way to show off some new tricks to players in a thematic, compelling way.
A special thanks to all my amazing patrons. I started this channel to speak more to the game theory of Magic, which often takes up more time than YouTube is kind for, and the generous support of my patrons makes it possible to create the way that I want to. Patrons have access to cut content, extended discussions, guides, and resources for their favorite decks, as well as the occasional spell table game over on Discord. Consider supporting the channel today. And if you like this video, give it a share and subscribe for more so you don't miss any of these upcoming videos.